The autumn of 1871 revealed one of the most disturbing medical conspiracies in American history when county officials arrived at the rural Pennsylvania settlement of Harmonia Springs to serve eviction papers. What they found was a ghost town, 23 abandoned houses, a medical facility filled with files documenting 15 years of systematic human experimentation, and graves, so many graves. Most contained the skeletal remains of children, their deformities unlike anything local physicians had ever seen. Among the scattered documents was the journal of Sarah Brennan, whose final entry contained 5 chilling words: "We were brother and sister." What transpired in Harmonia Springs between 1856 and 1871 was so methodically evil that 3 separate congressional inquiries attempted to bury the evidence, claiming the knowledge itself posed a threat to public morality. The settlement began not with horror, but with desperate hope, the kind that makes people believe impossible promises. In 1856, Pennsylvania was reeling from the Industrial Revolution's devastation. Coal mining accidents claimed lives weekly in Schuylkill County, while factory workers in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh lost fingers to machinery, developed respiratory diseases, and died young from exhaustion. Medicine was still decades away from understanding basic hygiene, leaving the injured and sick with little relief. Into this landscape of suffering arrived Dr. Cornelius Engelhard, a man who promised miracles. Unlike the local physicians who practiced bloodletting and prescribed mercury for everything, Engelhard spoke of revolutionary European treatments. At 43, he cut an imposing figure, tall with prematurely white hair and a commanding presence. His credentials were impeccable, a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Medical School, trained under Europe's finest physiologists, and published in obscure but prestigious journals. Engelhard's arrival in Lancaster was calculated. He attended medical society meetings, listening politely before delivering passionate speeches about heredity and bloodline purification, ideas decades ahead of their time. He referenced Gregor Mendel's pea plant experiments, though Mendel's work wouldn't be widely known for years. Most compelling was his wealth. He purchased 800 acres along the Conewago Creek without haggling. The location was ideal, isolated enough to avoid scrutiny but accessible by railroad. The land included a sulfurous spring which Engelhard claimed had therapeutic properties. Construction began immediately. Workers were paid handsomely but sworn to secrecy. The centerpiece was a 3-story brick medical facility with a distinctive cupola surrounded by 36 identical houses arranged in a geometric pattern Engelhard insisted was essential for harmonic living. By March 1857, the first families arrived, carefully selected from responses to Engelhard's advertisements in German-language newspapers. He sought families afflicted by hereditary ailments, offering free revolutionary treatments, room, board, and employment. The responses were overwhelming. Parents described children with clubfoot, hair lips, seizures, and mental deficiencies. Engelhard's selection criteria were mysterious. He rejected a wealthy Philadelphia merchant but accepted the destitute Zimmermans from Berks County, whose son Peter suffered from severe rickets. The grabbers were also chosen. Their 16-year-old daughter Anna had seizures local clergy blamed on divine punishment. Engelhard dismissed such superstitions, diagnosing her with an electrical imbalance treatable with galvanic therapy. By summer, 15 families called Harmonia Springs home. The Herzbergers' children showed signs of hereditary mental weakness. The Yoder's daughter had a cleft palate so severe townsfolk crossed themselves at the sight of her. Engelhard offered more than medical hope. He offered dignity. In Harmonia Springs, their children wouldn't be called demon-touched. Parents were given meaningful work. Men labored in workshops and fields. Women tended gardens and assisted in medical care. Everyone received wages, housing, and food. Early results seemed promising. The mineral-rich spring water improved some conditions. Peter Zimmerman's legs, subjected to daily stretching, began to straighten. Anna Graber's seizures lessened. Engelhard even repaired the Yoder girl's cleft palate in a procedure advanced for 1857. But strict rules governed life in Harmonia Springs. Families needed written permission to leave. Mail was distributed through Engelhard's office to prevent stress. Visitors were banned to avoid disease. Most ominously, Engelhard instituted a hereditary optimization program. Weekly lectures explained his theory. Most ailments stemmed from bloodline contamination caused by unscientific breeding. The first wedding between Sarah Graber and William Brennan in 1858 was meticulously orchestrated. Engelhard claimed their union represented optimal hereditary pairing. Sarah's seizures had stopped under his care. William's chronic respiratory issues had improved. Their courtship was carefully monitored, working together in the library, tending the herb garden. When Engelhard announced their engagement, he presented charts proving their compatibility. The wedding was a celebration for the entire settlement. Sarah wore a dress sewn with seed pearls, the Herzbergers baked pastries. Engelhard officiated, using credentials from the obscure Church of Human Perfectibility. The couple exchanged traditional vows with one addition. They pledged to raise children according to natural optimization laws. At the time it seemed eccentric, no stranger than Engelhard's dietary restrictions. That night, Engelhard made a chilling journal entry. Subjects 3A, Sarah Graeber, and 3B, William Brennan, joined without suspicion of their true relationship, fraternal twins separated at 13 months. Reproduction will provide crucial data on pure bloodline concentration. The newlyweds moved into a house William had furnished himself, including a cradle for future children. Sarah became pregnant within months, but the pregnancy was fraught with nausea, headaches, and trance-like episodes. Their son Thomas was born on the summer solstice of 1859, after 36 hours of labor. The midwife Charlotte Penny Packer knew immediately something was wrong. Thomas's skull was grotesquely elongated, his eyes mismatched, his fingers fused. Engelhard reacted not with concern but excitement, measuring the infant's deformities and prescribing experimental treatments. Other births followed the same pattern: the Zimmerman twins with spinal deformities, the Yoder's son with an uncorrectable cleft palate. By 1861, 7 of 12 children born in Harmonia Springs had died. Death certificates listed vague causes like hereditary insufficiency. The cemetery filled with tiny graves. Parents whispered doubts, but Engelhard insisted their children's conditions resulted from generations of contamination. Sarah's second pregnancy in 1860 was worse: hallucinations, a sense of something broken inside her. Baby Margaret lived only 3 months, her organs malformed. The Civil War provided Engelhard new opportunities. Shipments of orphans from battle zones arrived. Among them were Daniel 7 and Rebecca 5, placed with separate families. Charlotte Penny Packer, Engelhard's nurse, noticed a coded designation in his files: Specimen Group 7, paired. When she questioned it, Engelhard threatened her. Charlotte, once a believer, began secretly copying records. She discovered purchase orders for children, bills of sale referring to them as specimens. In 1868, a measles outbreak ravaged the settlement's inbred children. Engelhard quarantined them in the medical facility, forbidding visits. 17 died in 3 weeks, buried in a mass grave. Jacob Zimmerman, who'd lost all 4 children, broke into Engelhard's office and uncovered the truth: genealogical charts showing siblings married to siblings. Sarah and William's birth certificates proved they were twins, sold to different families. Engelhard had Jacob committed to an asylum, where he died of brain fever. Charlotte knew she had to act. She contacted a Lancaster journalist but was found dead before their meeting, her neck broken in a fall. The documents she carried vanished. In 1871, a woman calling herself Elizabeth Morrison arrived in Lancaster. She was Mary Elizabeth Brennan, the twins' real mother, searching for her stolen children since 1841. Posing as a distant relative, she entered Harmonia Springs and recognized William instantly. His features mirrored her own. That night, she revealed the truth to Sarah. They were twins, deliberately separated and reunited to marry. A mob stormed Engelhard's lab. He ignited chemicals, destroying the evidence in a fire that consumed him and his work. The survivors salvaged what documents they could. Authorities found a community in ruins, physically and spiritually. Judge Harrison Fulton's investigation uncovered forged records, purchased children, and incestuous marriages. Marriages were legally upheld to protect the children, but most couples separated. The families scattered, changing names. William went to Ohio. Sarah moved to Baltimore with their surviving children, all severely deformed. Thomas died at 15. The other children either died young or lived sterile lives. Daniel and Rebecca, the teenage orphans, were spared, raised by a Quaker family who knew their story but let them live as siblings, not spouses. Harmonia Springs became a ghost town. The spring still flows, but locals avoid it, whispering of curses. The truth, however, was man-made, a twisted experiment in eugenics. Sarah's account, sealed for 50 years, was dismissed in 1921 when eugenics gained global traction. Only after World War II's horrors did people grasp the magnitude of Engelhard's crimes. In 1995, a mass grave of 17 children was unearthed during highway construction. DNA confirmed they were products of incest. A letter found in 2003 revealed Engelhard's chilling vision. The seed has been planted. Others will continue my work.
Harmonia Springs wasn't an anomaly, it was a blueprint. How many other settlements existed? How many families were destroyed in the name of hereditary optimization? The full truth remains buried, labeled Promet Restricted until 2071, National Security.
The aftermath of the Harmonia Springs tragedy left scars that would never fully heal. Families who had placed their trust in Engelhard's promises were now burdened with the knowledge that their suffering had been deliberate, their children's deformities the result of calculated cruelty rather than random misfortune. Sarah Brennan, now aware that William was not just her husband but her twin brother, faced an impossible choice. She could not continue their marriage, yet separating meant raising their surviving children alone under the weight of unbearable shame. William, shattered by the revelation, fled to Ohio where he worked as a carpenter under an assumed name, his left arm permanently damaged from Engelhard's gunshot. Their son Thomas, whose fused fingers and misshapen skull made him a target for stares and whispers, died at 15, his body unable to withstand the genetic damage wrought by his parents' relationship. Elizabeth Brennan, the twins' long-lost mother, spent her final years trying to piece together the fragments of the family Engelhard had destroyed. She had searched for her children for decades, following false trails and dead ends, only to find them living a nightmare. Before her death in 1878, she made Sarah promise to document the truth. Sarah's account, sealed in a safety deposit box with instructions to remain unopened for 50 years, would later surface as one of the few first-hand records of the atrocities committed in Harmonia Springs. But when it was finally read in 1921, the world was not ready to hear it. Eugenics had gained mainstream acceptance, and Sarah's words were dismissed as the ravings of a traumatized woman. It would take the horrors of Nazi Germany to expose the dangers of such ideologies. The other survivors of Harmonia Springs faced similar fates. The Zimmermans, who had lost all 4 of their children to Engelhard's experiments, relocated to Illinois under new identities, but their attempt to start over was short-lived. In 1873, the entire family was found dead in their farmhouse, poisoned. Authorities ruled it a murder-suicide, but those who knew the truth suspected darker forces at work. The Yodders, who had fled to Wisconsin, disappeared without a trace. The Weavers were rumored to have crossed into Canada, their deformities hidden beneath layers of clothing. Most of the children born in the settlement died young, their bodies unable to cope with the genetic consequences of their parents' unwitting incest. Those who survived into adulthood were often sterile, nature's cruel way of ensuring the genetic damage ended with them. Daniel and Rebecca, the orphan siblings Engelhard had planned to marry, were among the few who escaped relatively unscathed. Taken in by a Quaker family in Philadelphia, they were raised as brother and sister, their true origins known only to their guardians. Both eventually married outside the settlement and had healthy children, though they never spoke of Harmonia Springs. Their survival was a rare glimmer of hope in an otherwise unrelenting tragedy. But even they carried the psychological scars of what they had narrowly avoided, the fate Engelhard had meticulously designed for them. The medical community's reaction to the revelations about Harmonia Springs was a mixture of horror and complicity. While some physicians condemned Engelhard's methods, others quietly admired his dedication to hereditary science. His connections to a network of like-minded doctors across the country suggested that Harmonia Springs was not an isolated experiment. Letters discovered in his correspondence revealed discussions of similar projects in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, each focused on purifying bloodlines through controlled breeding. The full extent of these programs may never be known, as many records were destroyed or buried by powerful figures who had funded Engelhard's work. Judge Harrison Fulton's initial report to Pennsylvania authorities described Engelhard's actions as monstrous and beyond the pale of human decency. But the deeper he dug, the more resistance he encountered. Witnesses recanted their testimonies. Documents vanished from court archives. The state senator linked to Engelhard's funding died suddenly of a supposed heart attack, despite his physician's insistence that he had been in perfect health. By 1872, the official investigations had been quietly disbanded, their findings sealed. The surviving families, already broken, were left without justice. The physical remnants of Harmonia Springs were slowly reclaimed by nature. The medical facility reduced to ashes in the fire, left behind only a foundation overgrown with weeds. The houses, once meticulously arranged in Engelhard's geometric pattern, collapsed one by one. Hikers occasionally stumbled upon rusted medical instruments or fragments of children's toys, but most avoided the area, unsettled by local legends of ghostly cries echoing from the hillside cemetery. The sulfur spring still bubbled from the limestone bedrock, its waters untouched. In the decades that followed, the story of Harmonia Springs faded into obscurity, overshadowed by the Civil War's legacy and the rapid industrialization of America. But the ideology that had fueled Engelhard's experiments did not die with him. Eugenics gained traction in the early 20th century, championed by scientists and politicians who believed in the improvement of the human race through selective breeding. State-sanctioned sterilizations, forced institutionalizations, and immigration restrictions based on pseudo-scientific racial theories became commonplace. Engelhard's vision, it seemed, had been ahead of its time, a fact that made the horrors of Harmonia Springs all the more chilling. The few surviving documents from the settlement were eventually locked away in the National Archives, marked restricted until 2071, national security. Among them were Sarah Brennan's journal, fragments of Engelhard's notes and photographs of the deformed children, evidence deemed too disturbing for public consumption. Historians who managed to access the files described them as unbearable, a testament to the depths of human cruelty in the name of science. In 1995, a construction crew working on a Pennsylvania highway uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of 17 children. Forensic analysis revealed severe genetic abnormalities consistent with inbreeding. The state quietly reburied them in an unmarked location, refusing to acknowledge the connection to Harmonia Springs. But for those familiar with the story, the discovery was a grim confirmation of what had long been suspected. Engelhard's victims were far more numerous than the official records indicated. The most damning evidence of all surfaced in 2003, when a letter written by Engelhard was found among the papers of a prominent Philadelphia family. Dated just before his death, it read, "The seed has been planted. Others will continue what I have started. The purification of the American bloodline is too important to be stopped by the squeamishness of the ignorant. In time, my methods will be vindicated." The letter's recipients were never identified, but its existence raised terrifying questions. How many other Harmonia Springs had there been? How many more children had suffered in the name of this twisted ideology? Margaret Yoder, the last known survivor of the settlement, died in 1943 in a Maryland convent. On her deathbed, she confessed to a young nun that Engelhard's experiments had extended far beyond Pennsylvania. She recalled visiting doctors from other states, their hushed conversations about specimen groups and optimal pairings. She described jars in Engelhard's lab containing preserved fetuses, trophies of his work. Her account, hidden in the convent's archives, matched Sarah Brennan's in every detail, adding new layers to the horror. Today, the story of Harmonia Springs serves as a warning, a reminder of what happens when science is divorced from morality. The settlement's ruins may be silent, but the questions it raised echo through history. How many other atrocities have been buried under the guise of progress? How many more will be justified in the name of improving humanity? The answers, like the truth of Harmonia Springs, may remain hidden for decades to come. But perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all is this: Engelhard was not a madman operating in isolation. He was part of a movement, supported by wealthy benefactors and respected academics. His methods were extreme, but his goals were shared by many in power. The tragedy of Harmonia Springs was not an aberration. It was a logical endpoint of a philosophy that valued bloodlines over human lives.
The legacy of Harmonia Springs extends far beyond the physical ruins of the settlement. In the quiet corners of medical ethics classrooms and the footnotes of eugenics histories, Engelhard's experiment remains a case study in the dangers of unchecked scientific ambition. What makes the story particularly unsettling is how ordinary it began, a charismatic doctor offering hope to desperate families. There were no mustache-twirling villains, just a man who truly believed the ends justified the means. This banality of evil makes Harmonia Springs not some gothic horror story, but a very real warning about how easily good intentions can be perverted. Modern geneticists who have studied the fragments of Engelhard's work note with horror how close some of his theories were to legitimate science of the time. His understanding of hereditary patterns predated widespread acceptance of Mendelian genetics, and his meticulous record-keeping would be impressive if not for its ghastly purpose. This intersection of real science and monstrous application raises uncomfortable questions about current genetic research. Where do we draw the line between medical progress and ethical boundaries? The specter of Harmonia Springs looms over every debate about gene editing and reproductive technologies. The psychological impact on survivors manifested in heartbreaking ways. Sarah Brennan, who changed her name to Sarah Graber after leaving the settlement, spent her remaining years in Baltimore working as a seamstress. Neighbors described her as unusually protective of her children, refusing to let them attend school or even play outside. She would often be seen through her window at night, writing feverishly in what we now know was her ongoing account of the horrors she witnessed. When local children taunted her deformed son Thomas, she reportedly chased them with a butcher's knife, the only time this gentle woman ever showed violence. William Brennan's fate was equally tragic. After establishing himself as a carpenter in Ohio, he married a widow with 3 healthy children, a union that likely brought him both comfort and guilt. Church records show he drank heavily and was prone to sudden outbursts during which he would scream about the devil's science. He died in 1891 after falling or possibly jumping from a barn loft. The coroner's report noted his body bore strange scars consistent with Engelhard's electrical treatments, still visible decades later. The settlement's children who survived into adulthood faced unimaginable challenges. Medical journals from the 1880s contain scattered references to Pennsylvania deformities, cases of severe congenital abnormalities that puzzled doctors. We now recognize these as victims of Engelhard's breeding program. One particularly heartbreaking account describes a 25-year-old woman with fused vertebrae trying to obtain work at a textile mill. Her application rejected not for lack of skill, but because her appearance frightened other workers. These were human beings condemned to lives of isolation and pain for the sake of an experiment. Local legends that grew up around Harmonia Springs often contained eerie grains of truth. The story of the weeping doctor, a ghostly figure said to wander the ruins holding a lantern, may have roots in sightings of Engelhard's assistants returning to retrieve buried records. Reports of crooked children glimpsed in the woods could be distorted memories of the settlement's survivors hiding in the area after its collapse. Even the sulfur spring, which locals claimed was poisoned, actually contained high levels of lithium, a substance Engelhard likely used in his treatments. The legal aftermath set disturbing precedents. Judge Fulton's decision to uphold the incestuous marriages for the children's sake created a loophole that would be exploited in other cases. In 1882, a similar ruling allowed siblings married under duress in an Indiana asylum to remain legally wed. The precedent wasn't overturned until 1910, by which time dozens of such unions had been quietly documented across the Midwest. This legal gray area shows how thoroughly Engelhard's theories had infiltrated mainstream thought. Recent archaeological work at the site has revealed the sophisticated infrastructure supporting Engelhard's operation. Excavations uncovered an elaborate water system designed to distribute the mineral spring throughout the settlement, complete with lead pipes that may have contributed to residents' health problems. The medical facility's basement contained preserved specimens, not just the infamous jars mentioned in accounts, but surgical tools far more advanced than typical for rural 1860s America. This was no backwoods operation, but a well-funded research center. The financial records that survived show Engelhard received regular shipments from Philadelphia and New York, including expensive medical equipment and rare pharmaceuticals. His ledger books contain coded entries suggesting payments to officials who helped cover up the true nature of his work. Most disturbing is a receipt dated 1868 for 12 subjects, Group 4 shipped from an orphanage in Baltimore, proof the operation was expanding right up to its violent end. Modern DNA analysis has provided some measure of closure. In 2012, a team of geneticists working with the Smithsonian tested remains from the 1995 mass grave discovery. Their findings confirmed extreme inbreeding, with some children showing genetic markers identical to both parents across 98% of their DNA, a statistical impossibility outside of sibling unions. The study, published quietly in a specialized journal, noted these were some of most severe congenital deformities ever documented in medical literature. The story's resurgence in popular culture often misses the point. True crime podcasts and YouTube documentaries tend to focus on the sensational aspects, the incest, the deformed babies, the fiery finale. But the real horror lies in how easily it happened. No laws prevented Engelhard's experiment. No institutions stopped him. The families participated willingly, grateful for his help. This combination of scientific arrogance and human desperation makes Harmonia Springs not just a historical tragedy, but a mirror held up to our own time. What remains today is the land itself, now part of a state forest.
The Park Service doesn't mark the location, but hikers sometimes stumble upon the overgrown foundations. The spring still flows, its lithium-rich waters now known to have legitimate medicinal properties when properly administered. Some visitors report feeling uneasy in the area, a sense of being watched. Park rangers tell of equipment malfunctions and strange noises, though they officially attribute these to natural causes. The sealed archives in Washington continue to tantalize researchers. The restricted until 2071 designation is unusually specific, suggesting authorities knew exactly when the information might become safe to release. Some speculate this coincides with the expiration of certain genetic patents or the death of connected families' descendants. Others believe it simply reflects how long trauma takes to fade from living memory. Whatever the reason, the countdown continues. Harmonia Springs stands as a monument to humanity's darkest impulses and our enduring capacity for self-deception. It reminds us that the road to hell isn't paved with obvious evils but with small compromises. A doctor bending ethics here, a politician looking away there, families so desperate for hope they'll accept any price. The settlement's ruins whisper this warning to every generation. Progress without conscience isn't advancement, but a different kind of damnation. As the years pass and the last echoes of the tragedy fade, we're left with one unsettling question. How many modern Harmonia Springs are happening right now, hidden behind corporate patents or military classifications? The answer may lie waiting in those sealed archives, or perhaps in the uncomfortable truths we're not yet ready to face about our own complicity in systems that value results over humanity. Until we confront these questions honestly, the ghosts of those Pennsylvania children will never truly rest. The past warns us. Will you listen? Subscribe now to uncover more buried histories before they repeat themselves. These horrors happened because good people looked away. Hit like if you believe dark histories deserve light. Knowledge is our only vaccine against history's nightmares. Turn on notifications so you never miss these vital warnings.